Good morning, Christos Anesti. Good to see everyone. Sorry for the delay a couple times now this morning. We just got off the Metropolis call with His Eminence and had lots of really good things to hear and to share and discuss about the reopening of our church doors. Really exciting stuff. And you will be getting information on that shortly here once the email blast goes out after the conclusion of this Synaxis discussion group. So again, let us start with prayer, and we can get right into our chapter for today and more exciting prospects of worshiping and sharing in Synaxis together in person soon. So let us continue with prayer. Let us pray, Lord have mercy. Christ is risen from the dead by death, trampling down death, and to those in the tombs he's granting life. Truly, the Lord is risen. Christ our God, we thank you for this day and for the beautiful news of the end in sight for the shelter-in-place order. We ask that you please allow us to make the necessary preparations and take the necessary measures to make sure that this is done safely, so that we may come together and worship you and enjoy fellowship without any fear or hesitation or reservation. Please watch over all of our faithful families, all of our Orthodox churches here in this region and in this country and in this world. And please allow us to learn how to cultivate a spirit of prayer, to continue to commune with you and to come into a closer union with you, our Lord and Savior. This we ask and pray. Amen. All right. As I mentioned, we are tentatively targeting May 31st as the first Sunday where the doors will be open for the public, again in limited numbers. We're still operating under the encouraged 6 feet across, apart from each other's social distancing standards. There's some question as to, are we going to be able to fill our church using the 6 feet? Can we use overflow and into the hall as well to watch it on the screen while the church service is going on? All of those answers came back in a positive manner from His Eminence. So we are going to have a parish council meeting on Thursday to discuss exactly what that looks like for us here in Wilmington. But exciting news nonetheless. So God willing, we will start seeing some of you beginning in 2 weeks. So that's really great. All right. Truly He is risen. Beginning to pray on to, what is it, chapter 4 or chapter 5? It's managing time. There are no chapter numbers, but managing time. It's a shorter chapter considering what we just talked about last week when we were talking about going inward. And just a brief recap, Metropolitan Anthony Bloom, Russian priest, became a metropolitan, came to the faith because he wanted to make sure that he saw a spiritual life that was congruent with what he had been hearing that was being preached. So he saw the preachers, he heard the preaching, he didn't think that it matched with the actual lifestyle that was being lived by many Christians. And so before he discounted it, he wanted to see, what, if there was anything to it. He quickly discovered that there was indeed a huge presence. The presence of the Lord was made manifest in his life through the scriptures and through his personal prayer. And then he kind of diagrammed a roadmap for us to begin to pray. And this is, again, a book for novices. So he said, you begin by acknowledging that you are absent, not that God is absent from you, but you are absent from God, that you, your spiritual powers, your spiritual awareness is not developed to the point where you always have an awareness for God and acknowledge His presence in your life. And so in those moments, there is the absence of God, in that if you want to pray, you need to rectify that. And in fact, prayer is the means by which you rectify that. So close the distance between you and God by always acknowledging that He's present in your life. But when you do that, you also confess that you are on the outside seeking admission into His kingdom and into the life with Him. So then you begin to knock on the door. You begin to knock on the door of heaven. And that door is not something that's up in the clouds, high away from us, something that's far removed from us, but it is something that is within us. And so we see that Christ resides within us. Our bodies become temples of the Holy Spirit. And the heart becomes the gateway to heaven and the stairway that leads to heaven. So if we are going to try and bridge the gap between us and God and try and yearn for a life with him and communion with him, we need to attend to ourselves, and we need to make sure that we penetrate the depths of our heart and kind of thaw any frozen ice or soften any kind of calloused surfaces of our hearts, kind of to penetrate, to get to the core of who we are. Having said that, our prayer must be genuine and must be authentic to who we are, and not something that is somehow, other than who we are. We're not just parroting or being a mime, or a puppet of someone else's words. We have to take those words and make them ours. So it has to be something that emanates from us. Otherwise, the prayer, when you offer your prayers in the morning, will be something that you leave in your home when you go out to do, to work or to school or to do your errands. But if they become words that reside within you, then you can take them wherever you go, and they become a part of you. And then your whole day then becomes a continuation of that prayer. And that is one of the essential marks and keys of last week's chapter of going inward, is making sure that when you go inward, when you reside within yourself through the rest of the day, then your entire day is something that is not hypocritical, which was what Metropolitan Anthony Bloom was initially really, really upset about, or one of his big criticisms of the faith. But it becomes something that that your prayer is not just done in name only, or in verbiage, or in just superficial kind of empty phrases that are offered to the Lord, but something that is actually seen in your life. That's a real quick 5-minute recap of the first 3 chapters. Now, chapter 4, we're talking about managing time. How do we do that? How do we carve out time for prayer? So let's begin. All right. So on page 81, he begins to say that time is a finite resource. And it's something that we've always said here at St. Nicholas. It's something that I've always grown up knowing from my various, the presiding priests that I've been working under, spiritual fathers that have been mentoring me, that if someone's going to give you their time, that is the most precious gift that they can offer, because it's something that expires. It's something that goes away. It never replenishes itself. We have a limited amount of time. And so if they're going to give you their time by coming to church or attending a discussion group, respect that, and don't take advantage of that, and make sure that you make the most of it. Well, he's saying the exact same thing here. He's saying you have very precious time, and you have to carve some of it out for prayer. And we sometimes feel urgently, or almost like deeply, passionately possessive of our time, because we know it's limited. We know that I have 14 days, 16 days, 14 hours, 16 hours, 18 hours in this day to get everything I need to done before I retire for the night. How do I manage that? How do I appropriate that and proportion that time out is very vital. And he is arguing that you have to portion part of that out for prayer. So if I only say, this is on page 81, if I will only say that if we try to waste a little less of the time, so we're not trying to create more time, we're trying to waste a little bit less. So it's saying anytime, he's insinuating that anytime you're not spending in prayer is time wasted, again, spiritually speaking. So if we can waste a little less of it, there will be more time. If we use the crumbs of wasted time to try and build short moments for recollection and prayer, we may discover that there is quite a lot of it. If you think of the number of empty minutes in the day that we spend doing something that is beneath what we should be doing, which is praying. iPhones now have a really great feature that every Sunday or whatever day you set it for, it's actually pretty appropriate. I don't know if this is just on my phone, but I get those updates that say, here's your weekly phone usage time. And it just so happens that it always clicks right at, 10 minutes before I start Orthros every Sunday. And so it's this nice reminder excuse me about that. Sorry, that was our parish council vice president about to call me about the call that we just had. So it's a nice little reminder to say, like, okay, Now you're carving out time to actually pray and to do the thing that you should be doing this whole week. Here's how often you didn't do it this week by just messing around on your phone. So if you can take a portion of that, whatever it is, 3 hours, 4 hours, 2 hours cumulative that you spent on your phone or doing whatever, if you take a fourth of that, an eighth of that, you might have a substantial amount of time to be dedicated to God. So you will realize that there are plenty of short periods which could belong not to God, but to both us and God at the same time. This continues the thought that he had on page 76. When on 76, he says, when you start your day with prayer, you are now confessing that this day does not belong to you, it belongs to God. So it's the two of you that have ownership of that day. It is God's own day, and that you will walk and become a messenger of God throughout that day. So if we understand that this time that we have spent, wasting it watching TV or, sitting around doing nothing, taking a nap, whatever it is, that we sleep for 9 hours a day. Okay, well, let's carve that back to 8.5, and now you've got an extra 30 minutes. Whatever it is. For those of you who have little children like us, and you sleep for 4 or 5 hours a day, if you're lucky, maybe keep that time sacred for your rest, for your own well-being, and for sure. So if any of you are nursing mothers, please keep sleeping when you have the opportunity to sleep. But you can find plenty of amount of time just in time wasted that you can dedicate to God. And then when you do that, it becomes God's time, which is pretty neat. All right. And then when you really think of it that way, you're managing what now? Are you managing your own time, or you're managing God's time? You treat that time a little differently. Okay. On the next page, page 82, there is absolutely no need to run after time to catch it. I thought that this was an incredibly powerful statement. The future, whatever you do about it, will become the present. And so there is no need to try to jump out of the present in order to get to the future. It's coming no matter what. We were saying that with our parish council the last few months about, our 5-year plan. 2025 is coming, whether we're going to work or we're not going to work. It's just a matter of, what do we want 2025 to look like when we get there? Are we going to be a parish that has grown? Are we going to be a church that has evolved and added to our inventory of resources and our inventory of ministries that we can provide for people, our assortment of ministries, our assortment of services that we can help share with the faithful? Or are we just going to kind of sit on our hands and wait for 2025 to come to us? So the future is coming. The future will be the present at some point. So there's no need in stressing to try and get there, or, to yearn for that, that future to come. It's coming. Just be attentive to the moments that you have today, so that when that future comes, it'll be an enjoyable present. All right. So I know that's a little bit deep and metaphysical, but hey, we're talking about praying here. And so that's to be expected. Okay. The mistake we often make with our inner life is to imagine that if we hurry, we will be in our future sooner. The mistake we often make is that if we hurry now, we will get to where we want to go faster. And time doesn't work like a road trip, right? It doesn't work that if I go 100 miles an hour, I will get there twice as fast as if I was going 50 miles an hour. That's not the way time works. A minute is a minute. A minute doesn't get shortened to 30 seconds when we're moving faster. And he speaks about that in a few pages here. Like a little like a man who ran from the last carriage of the train to the first, hoping that the distance between London and Edinburgh would be shortened as a result. It's senseless. It's foolish to think that. And so we can't treat time that way. So it doesn't make sense when we have carved out this period of time in our day to pray, and we said, all right, this is God's time, then it is not appropriate for us to then race through the prayers to try and get the prayers done faster so that we can check the box off. That is treating prayer like a road trip. That is treating prayer like, I got to get from here to 10 miles down the road, and I don't want to spend 10 minutes doing it. I want to spend 5 minutes doing it. That's not prayer. Okay. That is doing an errand. That's turning prayer into a chore. And that's not something that we want. Now, some of the faithful who are on this call might be laughing to themselves because I guess I have cultivated a little bit of a reputation of being a priest that celebrates the services with a somewhat brisk pace. And that is not in opposition to what this is saying. Like I said before, time is the most precious thing that our people have. And if someone is going to give me their time on Sunday, I'm going to make sure that I respect it. I have to make sure that our St. Nicholas prayer, our communal prayer, our corporate prayer is something that is deep and genuine and authentic, of course, and according to the traditions of the Orthodox faith, but it's also something that is accessible to all families, no matter what starting point they're in. Now, the 15 of you who are watching us live right here, you are among the people who have time and have prioritized that time to go to God and to go to your faith. But you know as well as I do that there are lots of families who every Sunday have a battle with their kids to say, we've got to go to church. And they're trying to start those little steps with their children to say, this is important. One day you will recognize that. And today, hopefully you get a little bit closer to recognizing that this is important so that you can continue to grow in the faith. If those families of 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, 3-year-olds come into the church and every Sunday it's a 4-hour marathon that they have to sit through, I might lose them. Whereas if we have, our services in a very lively and a very edifying and beautiful and appropriate and a very spiritually enriched kind of atmosphere, but an atmosphere that keeps us kind of moving and always engaged and always stimulated. If, say, we have a service that takes 60 minutes as opposed to 90 minutes, 100 minutes, 110 minutes, if we can keep that to 60 minutes and I can get those young families to come back next week and give me another 60 minutes, then all of a sudden in 2 weeks I've gotten 120 minutes, whereas opposed to trying to get them for 120 minutes in one service and then they never come back. So again, there's a balance here. We at St. Nicholas never rush through any services. We're never in a hurry to get through prayers. We just want to make sure that everyone is enjoying the services and praying in a light manner, in a joyful manner. And so there's a little bit of a balance here that we have to strike, where we have to kind of hit the middle of the road as far as all that spans all demographics. I can't just gear our services to the 80-year-olds and 70-year-olds, all the retired folk who have plenty of time, and have nothing else to do on a Sunday, but just to spend in church, but also those who are managing and saying, what, we can come to church before our 1 o'clock youth soccer game, because it would have been very easy to say that we've got soccer today, we're not going to come. So we're trying to make sure that everyone can find their faith in their life and make it, something that's genuine, something that resonates within them. Now, when we talk about our personal prayer, if we start to race through our personal prayer, this is the time that we've already dedicated. You're not managing other families. You're not trying to appeal to the masses. You're appealing to just yourself. And if you are in a hurry through that, now all of a sudden you're saying, well, what am I doing? Am I trying to check in and check out, clock in and clock out with God? Am I trying to put a timer on God right now and say, hey, you know what, God, I love you, but you've only got 10 minutes of my life right now, and I'm going to try and cut that down to 8. What does that say about ourselves? What does that say about our spiritual well-being? So again, we're not going to get to lunch faster by praying quicker in our personal life. We're going to finish our prayers, and then guess what? Now you just have 2 extra minutes to waste before it's lunchtime. It didn't get your next appointment to your faster. All right. So take the time, manage the time, and enjoy the time in prayer. Spend it, and don't worry about how long you spend in prayer when it comes to your personal prayer. Okay. Now, on 85, we're going to get metaphysical again, a little bit deep, and we're going to get philosophical here for a little bit. On page 85, he is saying this idea of, don't rush through things, don't look ahead to the next thing. What you have to do is to be so completely in the present that all of your energies and all of your being are summed up into the one word, now. You discover with great interest that you are in the now. So that has to be our theme when we talk about prayer. Our prayer kind of, we have to have that perspective of, this is the thing I'm doing right now. I don't care what's happening in 10 minutes once I'm done praying. I don't care what happened 10 minutes ago before I started praying. I want to pray here and now. I want to focus on being in the presence of God now. And then he caps it off with an incredible theological statement. I think that we must do exercises in stopping time and in standing in the present, in the now, which is my present, and which is also the intersection of eternity with time. The intersection of eternity with time. Let's spend a little bit of time to talk about that thought. So when you focus on the now, when you focus on the present, you are now fully entering into the presence of the Lord. You are being aware of His action in your life at this moment, and you are celebrating that, or you're trying to make use of that for supplicating Him, or asking for Him to help you in some manner. When you do that, you are now joining together eternity with your present time. You are now linking yourself with the heavenly kingdom that exists beyond time. And our God, who sees outside of time, is now seeing you in this present moment, which is really, really incredible. So that's how memorial prayers work. We talked about that in previous Synaxis classes, when we said, well, hold on. If we know that your life is kind of the battleground in which you work out your own salvation through good deeds and all of that, and through beseeching God to be merciful to you, if your life is the time to do that, and there is no repentance beyond death, then why are we praying for those who have died? Or why do we offer memorial prayers if there is no repentance after death and judgment is final upon the repose of a soul? A qualifying statement: we don't know how God works His judgment. We just go by what He has given to us in the Scriptures, and what He's given to us in the Scriptures is that it's when you die, that's your judgment. As you can see from like the rich man and Lazarus, right? So when you die, there is no time to kind of alter anything. It's your judgment day. However, God is great and all powerful and all merciful and all loving and all knowing, and He will never make a wrong verdict. And if it's His prerogative, it's His discretion to use mercy on whoever He sees fit. Okay, so He will save whoever He wants to save, because He is the Lord and He created them, and He has complete authority over that. However, the reason why we offer memorial prayers, that's one, because we are hopeful that God will, find some way to save a person, even if they, didn't find or take advantage of the ways to save themselves. But the other reason is that we know that God exists beyond time, and He sees everything outside of time. And so when we are praying in this moment, He has heard that prayer years ago. He has heard that prayer. He will hear that prayer years from now. He sees us, our life in its entirety, at all times. So when you're when your grandparents pass away 10 years from now and you offer a memorial prayer for them 10 years from now, he's hearing that now. He's hearing that today. He's seeing that. He's acknowledging that in this moment. He sees all of this. So our memorial prayers are not, too late ever. They're never expired, just because we are now coming to that moment where our loved one has passed away. We are the ones that are who are subjected to time. He's not. He can do anything. He exists outside of that. Now, having said that, when you are praying in this present moment, you are now linking yourself to that. You're linking yourself to God, who is outside of time. And so it is the intersection of eternity with time. God in Hebrew was never referred to by name. He was never called God. And so they always called him Yahweh, or, they had many different names for him, but one of the most popular is Yahweh, which means the same thing as on. Yes. Okay. This icon around Christ's head, you can see in his halo, right? On, W-O-N, right? On, which is the Greek version of Yahweh, which means the one who is. The one who is. Now, note, that is a huge statement. The one who is, that's present. That's not past, that's not future, not the one who was, not the one who will be, but the one who currently is, the one who is present in all times. That is an incredible statement because it's always true. If you go to somebody and say, are you hungry? I am hungry. Okay, he is hungry. Well, he's going to eat, and then he is no longer hungry. His is changed. He is not hungry anymore. He was hungry, and he will be hungry again. So his condition changed. God is immutable. His condition never changes, including his presence, which means that God is eternal and has always existed. So before we were, he is. He always is. So before creation, God is. After creation, after the second coming, God still is. He will always be present. And that's an incredible thing to say. He never expires. He always is, and he never changes. So when God, and I'll give you an example of this, when Christ is being arrested, I believe it's the Gospel of Mark that has this particular angle or incident that happened during the arrest. When Christ is being arrested, the centurions come up to him, or the temple guard, the soldiers come up to him, and they go to arrest him, and they say, "Are you Jesus? Are you the person that we're supposed to arrest? Are you the Christ?" And he says, "I am," and they fall back. They're pushed back by that profound truth that's deeper than just the words that were said. When he says, "I am," he is making the greatest theological statement of all time. We're just, I am. I never was not. So when finite ears, when created ears heard the uncreated say that he is, and we know that we are not, we were not, and we will not be forever. When we hear him say, I am, we are hearing him profess that he is eternal. He, no matter what they're going to do to him, in torturing him, mocking him, executing him, when they think that they've killed him and made him past tense, he still is. He is God. And even his death didn't stop that. I warned you that we were going to get a little deep right here. But that's the point, is when we are praying, in that moment is the only moment where we truly exist. Because now we are acknowledging our life, and we're not guaranteed another second. The second we're done with this call, I might die. We all might. Our death is coming at some point. Our uncreation is coming at some point. So we can't take it for granted. So the only thing we have is this present time. And so when we use it in prayer, now we are linking our current present, our conditional I am, our conditional present existence with the eternal existence of God. And now all of a sudden we are communing with the eternal. We are uniting our presence with his eternal presence. So it is the intersection of time, us, with eternity, him. And when you put it that way, what else during the day do we have to do that is more important than that? Nothing. So, having said that, I think we can carve a little bit less time from here into a little bit more time here. Okay? That's, again, advice that we all need to hear, including myself. All right. Next, page 86. All right, so the way to do this, here we go. The way to do this, you are doing something which you feel is useful. You feel unless it is done, the world will falter on its course. So this is all of the things. He's talking about all of the things that are opposed to prayer. All of the things you could be doing while praying that you kind of are thinking about while you're praying. Like, hey, I think I need to end this prayer right now because there's this other thing that's kind of rolling around the back of my mind that I need to attend to. So you're thinking all of these things are so essential that the world will stop spinning if you don't do it. And then if at a certain moment you say, I stop, you will discover many things. First, you'll discover that the world did not falter, that the whole world, if you can imagine it, can wait for 5 minutes while you are not busy with it. The world will wait 5 minutes for you to, I'm sorry, finish the email blast that did not go out at 6 a.m. this morning because there was a lot going on and I wanted to make sure that the updates from the Metropolis's phone call was on it. So I said, okay, the email blast can wait until noon today. And maybe it'll have to wait until 12:30 because we'll be on this class until about noon. The world can wait while you pray. This is important because we usually deceive ourselves saying, well, I have to do it. It's charity or it's duty. I cannot leave it undone. You can, because at moments of sheer laziness, you will leave it undone for much longer than 5 minutes that you have chosen for God. So your essential thing that you have to do today, the 5 minutes that you don't do it because you are praying, pales in comparison to the 3 hours you didn't do it during whatever movie you were watching, right? So don't say that these 5 minutes of prayer or 10 minutes of prayer or however long you are devoting to prayer every day, don't say that small amount of time is the time that is make or break for this to-do list that you have that is so important. You can get it done. I remember when I was an undergrad at East Carolina University, I was an art major, and so we didn't have tests, we didn't have exams, we had critiques, we had projects. So while everyone was cramming, the week before an exam or the night before an exam, that didn't really apply to art students. For art students, it was like a whole, week, a whole month, a whole semester of working on projects and getting them critiqued and then coming back and then getting them critiqued and editing and then getting them critiqued and getting them ready for your final critique. So your exams were like an ongoing process through the whole semester. And I remember the 2 weeks before my critique, my final critique was Pascha. Pascha was late one year. And it was Holy Week. And I remember we had a mission church in Greenville. Now it's a full parish, but it's still a smaller parish. And I remember calling my mom and saying, hey, Mom, how's Holy Week going in Charlotte? I can't come home because I've got all of these classes that I still have to take and we're not off. But I don't even know if I can make it to a couple of the services that they are offering here at church here in Greenville, because I've got these massive. I got like 5 projects for these 5 classes that I have to get done for our final critique, and I just don't know if I'm gonna be able to, if I'm gonna have time. And my mom, I'll never forget this to this day. I don't even necessarily remember the exact words she said, but what she said was, the time you take to work on the projects that you're going to work on is enough. Whatever it ends up being. If you go to church and you have 2 hours less, whatever, to work on those projects will be fine without those 2 hours. If you stay home and you work on them, they'll be fine too. But she was like, but going to church is not going to break your grades. They're not going to break the projects. And if you need to find more time, you will find more time someplace else. So she like liberated the stress from me. She said, oh, well, I'm not going to tell you to go. You be the judge of that. Just know that that's going to take care of itself. Your project is going to get itself done in some manner, and it'll be fine with or without the extra time that you gave it. But you are going to benefit much greater from that 2 hours spent in church as opposed to the 2 hours in the photo studio, and I did. And in fact, I went to church the entire week with whatever services they offered. I think they had like 4 services that week. And I think I got straight A's or something that in those critiques. So it was wise words. And again, not worrying about speeding us up to get to the future, or worrying about the future here in the present, worrying about the present now in the presence, in the present, and the future will come to you, and you'll be prepared, and you'll be that much more ready to receive it if you attend to the present wisely through prayer. Pauline, that's a really good comment. I have that same Chronos versus Kairos. I have that same note right there. Very good. We're going to talk about Chronos versus Kairos right now. So the simplest way to do is to have an alarm clock. This is on the page 87, the top of 87. The simplest way to do this, to carve out time for God, is to actually use a clock. Go figure, right? The simplest way to do this is to have an alarm clock. Wind it and say, now I am working without looking at the clock until it rings, right? That is very important. One of the things which we must unlearn is looking at the clock. So if we, in St. Mark, Father Mark is super, super meticulous and organized. And he came from his first, 15, 16, 17 years of being a priest was being an office priest, being either the youth director for the archdiocese, being the youth director for the metropolis of Denver. He was always working on, I got appointments, I got schedules, I got things that need to get done, or else a whole metropolis or a whole country full of youth ministries will, are going to suffer because of it. So he was always meticulous. And he always used to say that the calendar is sacred. He's like, what you see on the calendar is like gold standard. It is sacred. You can't move it. And so we always had to abide by that. And we'd always have to say like, hey, you know what? I've got this much time for you right now. And in this amount of time, I'm not going to be checking my phone. I'm not going to be answering another email. You've got this 30 minutes of me undivided, without any kind of rushing or, looking beyond what we're doing right now. You've got my complete and undivided attention for these 30 minutes, for these 60 minutes, for whatever it is. And then you were more effective in that time. And we're going to talk about that here in a couple pages. And then you were ready to move on. You actually had a brisker pace when you did that, as opposed to trying to multitask at the moment. So what he is saying here is, okay, if you are finding that you are losing a battle with time in your prayer life, okay, use time, like you use fire to fight fire in this sense. And we always say that that's not the way you do it with the passions, because the passions, you can't try and fight anger with, being mad at it or being angry with it. But in this case, you can. So use time to combat your struggle with time. Say, okay, I am not going to look at my clock or any other thing for the next 5 minutes. Set the timer, go. And then when it rings, that's when you stop praying. And then you'll know that you had that 5 minutes where all you did was pray to God. And you know what? After a while, the timer will surprise you. At the beginning, it's going to be like, oh my gosh, when's this timer going to go off? And then you realize, hey, I'm not in the present anymore. I'm looking ahead 3 minutes in the future or whatever it is. But after a while, when you start getting good at it, you'll realize that the timer sneaks up on you. It surprises you. And you're like, oh, wow, okay, I still had more that I would like to say. And if that's the case, continue to pray and kind of like disregard the timer a little bit. But or adjust the timer for the next day to say, okay, 6 minutes, 7 minutes the next day. So use the clock to almost silence itself, to mute itself. Okay, I'm not going to listen to that phone for the next 5 minutes, and I'm going to use my phone to tell me that I'm not going to listen to that phone for 5 minutes. I'm going to use the timer on that phone to tell me to not look at that phone. So use a clock. So this chronos, Greek word for time, like chronology or chronic symptoms or what have you. Chronos is like the 12 hours in a day, the 60 minutes in an hour kind of thing. Kairos is God's time. It's time that exists outside of time. It is the order of things, the divine structure of things. So it is, how he prioritizes things. And so, in fact, before every liturgy, the priest offers a prayer outside of the altar to ask for permission to go into the altar and serve. And that prayer service, which is done without anyone in the church, unless the chanter got there early or whoever, it's done without any kind of like cameras or microphones on. During that service, the priest is asking for God to remove him from time and enter him into God's time. Allow me to stand before this holy altar and offer these timeless mysteries to those people who exist in time. And so that service, that prayer service, is called the service of Kairos, the service of God's time. So when we pray, we are leaving, time as we know it, and entering into God's priority or hierarchy of the order of things, his time without time. Great point, Pauline. Okay. Then, continuing with the alarm here on page 87, then when the alarm clock goes off, you know that for the next 5 minutes, the world has come to an end and you will not move from that spot. It's God's own time. You settle back in his own time and quietly, silently, and peacefully pray. Okay? In reality, you will discover quite soon that you can very well postpone it for 3 or 5 or even 10 minutes and nothing happens. And if you are doing something that requires attention, you will discover how much better and how much quicker you can do it. This is where we look at prayer as like your work breaks, your coffee breaks, your 7th inning stretch, where now you are recharged and that much more able to do the thing that is so important for you to get done the rest of the day. If you woke me up from a dead sleep and then started talking to me about the agenda for the parish council meeting that we're going to have on Thursday, I'd be sleepy-eyed. My mind wouldn't be in a position, in a state, in a condition to answer you or to even listen to what you're saying. I'm just going to hear like the Peanuts adult voices, right? The mumbled, garbled sound that Charlie Brown hears all the adults talking in. But if I wake up and then I pray and I've kind of centered myself, oriented myself within my standing with God and found myself in his presence, now all of a sudden I found myself and I've oriented myself in my own day, in my own responsibilities. And so now that I understand and I'm aware of God's workings in my life, now I'm aware of all these other things that are a part of my life now too. And I'm that much quicker and able and coherent enough to respond to them. And I will be much more efficient once I do. So you'll see that you'll be much more productive once you add these little 5-minute prayer breaks in there as well. He puts in a story about when he was a physician and he was seeing patients and how his patients, he eventually, he would see the long line of people in the waiting room, and all he would see while talking to the patient in the room were like the 10 heads of the other patients out in the hall. And he realized while he was doing it, he'd speed through each visit that he had in his office. And then afterwards, he realized, oh my gosh, I got to see all of these patients again because I didn't pay attention to anything that they were saying. And before I prescribe any treatments for them, I have to talk to them again. I have to pay attention to what they actually say. So he was saying when I realized that, then I stopped worrying about the people in the waiting room, and I started only worrying about the person who was in my office. And then I became a much better doctor, a much more efficient doctor. And which is kind of, again, strange to think about, I became faster because of that. I didn't have to meet with that patient multiple times. I met with them once. I understood everything that I needed to because I attended to them in that moment. And now the next time I met them, I was ready to perform surgery or to prescribe the treatment that they needed. I didn't need to have a follow-up visit with them. So I actually ended up saving, time, at least in his mind. And so, again, I'm a Carolina fan, and Dean Smith and Roy Williams after that always put in thoughts for the day. And actually, we're going to talk about two thoughts of the days that they would always say. But one of the thoughts of the day actually came from John Wooden, the coach at UCLA. And he said, play fast, but don't hurry. And I always say it to my basketball teams too, when we're coaching and when we're playing in seasons, play as fast as you can with as much effort and energy as you can, but don't push yourselves to the point where you can't control it anymore. Play fast, but don't hurry. And then it's kind of the same adage of, smooth is fast, fast is slow. Smooth is slow, slow is fast, or whatever it is. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. That's what it is. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. So when I take care, when I make sure that I'm doing the right thing at the right time, that'll make me smoother and make less mistakes, and then I will be quicker in it. So again, work with your measures and attend to the moment, not worry about getting ahead of yourself. Which brings me to the second thought of the day that the Carolina coaches would always say. So he says on the page 88 here, I decided that I would behave as if the person who was with me was the only one who existed in the world. And that comes from a famous quote by Leo Tolstoy. And again, remember, this is a Russian author who's writing about another Russian author. So Tolstoy once said, remember that there is only one important time, and it is now. The present moment is the only time over which we have dominion. The most important person is always the person with whom you are, who is right before you. For who knows if you will have dealings with any other person in the future? The most important pursuit is making that person, the one standing at your side, happy. For that alone is the pursuit of life. I shared that quote with my basketball team, just like Coach Dean Smith and Coach Roy Williams, after him did as well. But the idea is if you attend to the matter at this moment, you won't worry about how many shots the other team made up until now. You're not going to worry about, oh my gosh, there's only a little bit of time left remaining in the game. You're just going to worry about this moment right now. And if you remember the task that you have to do right now, and the teammates or the person you're guarding right now, that's the only thing that exists in this moment, you will succeed in that moment, and the next moment will be easier. The next moment after that will be easier, and you will position yourself for success when the future eventually arrives. That's the whole way we need to approach prayer, and it's what he started with at the beginning of the chapter. If we attend to the now, the present the future when it comes, when it becomes present, will be a better present. Okay, so that's what we need to do. We're just focusing on the here and now, being present with the Lord, the one who is always present. And if we do that, the future will take care of itself. Okay? So, and then he goes on to say this. Can you imagine that only 1 minute goes by every minute? And that's what we said earlier. You can't treat time like a road trip. You can't say, okay, this mile I can get done faster if I go faster. Time doesn't work that way. When you speed up, time still stays at that same pace, right? That same 1 Mississippi, 1/1000, whatever you call, however you count. So 1 minute goes by, and it takes it 60 seconds, no matter if you're in a rush or not. Okay, no, every moment, every minute counts as much as the next minute. Every hour as much as the next hour. Now, when you realize that, and you plan your time accordingly, you will realize that, okay, I spent those 5 minutes in prayer and the world didn't spin off of its axis. Nothing disastrous happened at all. You may say, shall I have time to do whatever it is that I'm worried about at all? Am I going to have time to do it? And I will answer you in a very Russian way. If you do not die first, you will have time to do it. If you do die before it is done, then you don't need to do it. It's a little cynical, but it's very true. If you don't die before you have to do it, you'll get to do it. And prayer is not going to keep you from doing it. If you die before you do it, then you didn't need to do it anyway. Right? So I think that's kind of what my mom was trying to say in a very, simplified version. So then he goes on to talk about, again, how we always view the future as so much more urgent than, what the present is. And so he uses the disciples in the boat on the stormy sea with Christ sleeping as a way to paint that. Christ is at ease in the presence, in the present moment. He's sleeping. He's resting. The disciples are anxious because they are worrying about their impending doom, and they wake up Christ with anger, with almost resentment, with indignation, saying, "Do you not even care that we're about to die? That we are about to die? That we are perishing?" And he said, "Well, why do you have little faith?" And then he quiets the storm. So we can't worry about the future storm or what the future storm will mean for us. Worry about the present. Pray, know that you are in the presence of the Lord. The disciples were literally in the boat with Christ, and they forgot that he was with them. So remember that you're with Christ and focus on the here and now, and the future will take care of itself. The future will be, not without effort. I'm not going to say just sit there and pray and don't worry about doing your work at all, or the things that you have to do. You have to do them, at some point. But praying will refresh you and recharge you and make you more efficient when you actually get around to doing those things. Learn to master time, and you will be able, whatever you do, whatever stress, in the storm and tragedy or simply in the confusion in which we continuously live, if you learn to master time, you will be able to be still, immobile in the present, face to face with the Lord. And that's when you can learn how to pray even amidst distractions. So manage your time, master your time, and you will be able to stand in the presence of the Lord in the present time without worrying about or shifting nervously or itching to get on to whatever the thing is that you have next to do. Okay. And then he kind of equates it to the eye of the storm. As long as you stay with the Lord in prayer, as long as you stay with the Lord within prayer, you're almost like safely within the eye of the storm. The storm's not affecting you. It's happening around you, but it's not affecting you because you're in the calmness of the eye. Okay. And then finally, we've got a couple more things that he says, and then we'll conclude. He shares a story about a woman who prayed for 14 years. And just constantly talking and saying so-and-so, but seeing like she had never been answered. And he said, well, if you had prayed like that for 14 years, that means you have been talking for 14 years and you haven't listened for 14 years. You also have to listen to God. You have to just be present in his presence. And then that's prayer. So you have to also hear what God has to say. You have to be quiet in those times. So you have to make time for silence as well, not just make time to speak. And so he says on page 93 that he became more and more aware of the silence. He started to hear the little noises in the house. He started to hear the little like tick-tock noises of the clock that he never gets to hear. I had no need of straining myself, and then I perceived that this silence was not simply an absence of noise, but that the silence had substance to it. It was not absence of something, but presence of something. All of a sudden, I perceived that the silence was a presence. So if we manage our time, then silence won't disturb us. We won't hear silence and be like, oh gosh, all of this wasted time that I need to be doing this thing. I need to be adding noise to my life that's so necessary. In that moment, silence will be something that brings you peace and helps you reflect so that you are able to attack the thing that you need to do that much more ferociously and with that much more intent, and get it done quicker and get it done, smoother. Um, and so this continues on 94 when he says, if instead of being so intent on doing things, we could simply say, I am in God's presence, what a joy, and be still. That's the way we need to approach prayer. And funny enough, my little note that I wrote on the side of the page there is like what mindset you need to have when a bishop comes to visit, because you don't have any time. when a bishop comes to visit, your itinerary is just the itinerary for when things start. There is no itinerary for when things end. So you have to make sure that you don't put too many things, smashed together, because when a bishop comes, you kind of suspend all time, because they're operating on this order, this organization of this is the hierarchy, these are the priorities of what we need to get done, and the biggest priority is just to spend time together, right? If our spiritual life is so prioritizing just being still in the presence of the Lord, then Christ, who is exemplified by the bishops, by the hierarchy of the church, when they come to the parishes, we have to kind of suspend our own like timeliness and order of things to then be present with them, because they represent Christ, to be present with our chief shepherd and kind of just go with the flow that they set. And so, I kind of wrote that note a little bit tongue in cheek in my book, but it's actually a very keen parallel. So having said all that, that concludes the chapter on managing time. The next and I believe final chapter is addressing God, which we will do next week. There are a couple of reflections that are in the appendix in the additional chapters of this book, but for our purposes, we'll be concluding with addressing God next week, and then we will have wrapped up beginning to pray. Look at that. We did this book in hopes of equipping the faithful for kind of life without the church, as far as being present in the church physically. And now it's going to wrap up just in time for the churches to reopen. So that's really nice. So Helen asked a question. So let's address that before we close with prayer. Helen asked, will Christ still have holes in his hands in heaven since he is? Very good question. So we know that when Christ rose from the dead, he appeared to the disciples, and the disciples couldn't recognize him because he was so transfigured. He was so transformed and perfected. His countenance was something that was beyond their ability to perceive him and recognize him. But when he made himself known to them, they recognized him. So like Mary Magdalene thought he was the gardener. Cleopas and Luke on the road to Emmaus didn't recognize him. They just thought he was a visitor to Jerusalem. So he appeared to them in a form that looked different to physical eyes. But on the 8th day, when he came back to the disciples and appeared to Thomas, he had wounds. He had his wounds that Thomas, sought to perceive. He said, I'm not going to believe unless I put my finger in his hand and put my hand in his side. Well, guess what? Christ had those. Does that mean that that's the way he now is? I'm not sure if that's accurate. because we know that he took on a temporal form. He took on a mortal frame by being born of the Virgin, on Christmas. And that's not the part of him that is, that is eternal. He took on mortal nature. So his mortal nature was the nature that was crucified. We didn't kill God. We didn't kill his divinity. His divinity, his essence, is beyond us. We couldn't crucify his essence, because that means that we would be crucifying the Father and the Holy Spirit as well. So we didn't do that. That's the part of him who is always eternal. God, Christ, did not exist in heaven before, Christ did not exist before creation with a physical body. His physical body was born and fabricated and crafted in the Virgin's womb, right there. So his human form is not eternal. So otherwise, how did he grow as a child? How was he held, and how was he nursed as an infant, and then also grow into a 30-year-old man? How did if he is and doesn't change, how could that happen? So his eternal, omnipresent, present condition is not something that is necessarily seen in his human form. So it's his divine form that is the eternal constant. His human form is what he took on momentarily to impact and bring salvation to us. So, great question. That's a great question. So, I don't know if he's always going to have holes in his hands. I don't. I'm sure he he will do whatever he's got to do, whatever he wants to do, and he very well may. I know that Thomas saw him, so perhaps. But we'll get answers on that, when the future comes. So let's worry about the present. So, but good question, Elaine. That's where we stand right now. That's managing time. And we look forward to talking about addressing God, which holds a lot of what we think about praying in our minds when we started reading this. I bet a lot of people thought that we would be talking about things in next week's chapter, the whole 5 weeks. So look forward to next week, because it's going to have a lot of the practical things about how to actually pray, about the craft of praying. So thank you all for being with us. God bless you all. And again, stay tuned on the website and keep looking at your emails, one which will be coming here in the next few minutes with updates on when we are reopening our doors and how we're going to do that. Really excited to see you guys all again here in the near future. God bless you all. Stay safe. Let's continue by closing with a prayer. Christ is risen from the dead, by death trampling on death, and to those in tombs he's granting life. Truly, the Lord is risen. Christ our God, thank you for this day. Thank you for giving us the blessing of time, the blessing of every moment that you have ordained for us to be on this earth. Allow us to carve out more of it for you, and to understand that the time is yours. It's not ours. We are just the managers of it. Allow us to use it more appropriately, more wisely, more efficiently. Allow us to always run to seek and to yearn to be with you, and to recharge ourselves and be more efficient in the rest of our days as well. Please watch over our families, our friends, all of those who are suffering from the COVID-19 pandemic. And please guide us to do the right things and the right steps and measures to reopen our churches and to start reassembling our lives in this post-pandemic state. Allow us to do it safely, and allow us to do it with great care and great tact. This we ask and pray. Amen. God bless you guys. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and we will see you all again soon. Just a word, an announcement that we will have liturgy on Thursday for St. Constantine and Helen. I'm not sure if Alexandros will be here to manage the YouTube stream, but you can stream the service live on our website by using the 24/7 camera, the Nest camera, which will be, it's just on all the time. So at the very worst case scenario, you can always stream the service through that. And we are looking forward to seeing you all again soon. God bless. All right.